You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Mai Rodriguez. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin for war crimes due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This comes as the Philippine government appeals to the ICC to suspend the investigation into the drug war killings under the administration of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Our source today, the Secretary General of the NUPL-NCR, Kristina Conti. She is also ICC Assistant to Counsel. Good morning, Attorney Conti.
Good morning, Mai.
Okay, first of all, please help us understand the effect of this ICC warrant for President Putin, since Russia, like the Philippines, also withdrew from the Rome Statute in 2016. So is this warrant even enforceable?
Well, to be technical about it, the warrant against President Putin has no effect on the investigation in the Philippines. These are two separate investigations that are being undertaken. But in comparison, we are at the same stage as the situation in Ukraine. They are determining, well, at their stage, they are determining what crimes have been committed. And in fact, they're looking at genocide and war crimes. But to be exact, in the Philippines, we're already looking at who are most responsible. So we're at kind of a different stage. But the fact that we are both in the investigation stage, not at the trial stage, means that the ICC has the teeth, so to speak, has the teeth and the power to really issue out court orders as to the matter of enforceability that is in question. Although this is very peculiar and interesting, because you have two heads of government who are being held to account for state policy.
So that is the question, if this is enforceable, and if yes, who would arrest President Putin?
Yes, that's the question now in international communities, because Russia is not a member of the International Criminal Court. And that means its police are not beholden to the requirements or the obligations of the treaties. The ICC has no police force of its own. It would rely on the police of its member states. So the police in Russia obviously would not be arresting Putin at any time. But we do note that there are many other member states who have their own police. And in fact, the ICC has a coordination mechanism with the Interpol. So if these two heads of state, one current, one prior, ever step out of the comfort zones, so to speak, then I would bet that they would find themselves within the hands of any of the member states. Now, here's the point that perhaps should be chilling enough for President Putin. The case of the former Serbian president, Milosevic. He never saw himself within the hands of any tribunal. But then we must remember that he died precisely in the hands of the United Nations under trial, under a different tribunal, not the ICC. But then, you know, things can develop very differently.
Russia, of
which
course,
is why we think that if the ICC flexes its power as well, its authority, and issues a warrant of arrest, similarly a preventive warrant of arrest, rather a preventive mechanism, warrant of arrest for President Duterte, it could similarly be enforced.
But of course, Russia called the warrant void and meaningless. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and also if you say that any of the ICC member states can enforce the arrest of President Putin, but who would step up? And also, how to avoid an eruption of conflict or tension?
That second question would be rather complicated to answer. But then for the ICC, they look at it through a legal lens or a test called the interests of justice. So if they see that in a situation, in a location, particular location, it would not be in the interest of justice to pursue an investigation or trial before the ICC, they would defer or they would withhold or perhaps stop entirely an investigation. But from what we've seen in the pleading submitted before the court, the Office of the Prosecutor clearly banks on the interest of victims in the Philippines, on the call for victims of Filipinos themselves for this investigation by the ICC. The lack of accountability in the country is in fact more of a source of instability rather than this investigation by the ICC. If the Philippine government refuses to act on this any further, then I would say that this lack of inaction, or rather this inaction, or administrated, what I were to suggest or to draw from experience, immovability. So they, however, there have been certain circumstances even entirely. He never left Iraq, or he was just thereabouts. But then he ended up dead as well in the midst of a war. Several other leaders have also tried to evade the jurisdiction of the ICC by flitting or moving from one country to another. But eventually, there is that one country or one authority that will see that it would be in the interest of international peace to really settle these matters before a court of justice.
Mm-hmm. Well, Attorney Conti, let's go to the Philippine situation. The Office of the Solicitor General already appealed to the ICC to reverse its decision to resume its probe on the drug war. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Does this carry any weight?
The submission, yes, it is recognized as a submission from the Philippines. In fact, the Philippines seems to have engaged an international lawyer. I don't know if we have paid this international expert to represent the Philippines. They have submitted this to the appeals chamber as a valid submission. However, as to the arguments, as to the substance, it's a rehash of what they have already been saying before the pre-trial chamber. In fact, we do note that this is on the appeals stage. This is before the appeals chamber, meaning they have already lost a decision before the pre-trial chamber. The appeals chamber is a different chamber altogether, composed of different judges. So they might think differently. But then I would say, based on the merits, these matters have already been passed upon. And it would only just allow the ICC to reiterate and stand firmer on its decision that, one, the ICC still retains jurisdiction, even if the Philippines is no longer a member. And on the part of Russia, even if Russia is not a member. Also, you do understand that Ukraine, in fact, is not a member of the ICC, but it allowed itself to be within the jurisdiction of the ICC under Article 12. So you can also do that. And secondly, among the most important substantial points is that the domestic investigation in the Philippines is not sufficient. And I note with alarm a paragraph in the appeal of the Philippine government that they think that perhaps by the end of an investigation in the Philippines, there would only be a low-level or a mid-level official that may be held accountable for this. This is alarming for us, especially for the victims of the war on drugs, because that would be contrary to our experience and to what we have observed on the ground. You have all these mid-level and even say, lower level and mid-level officials acting on the orders of somebody higher. The people we are looking at on the ground, the ones that have literally, in Filipino, kinalabit ang gatilyo, pulled the trigger. They're saying that they're not the ones who ordered these killings, or they are not the ones who want these killings to happen. There's somebody else that we can clearly point to, and he can be held accountable for that with his public speeches and very fiery statements about the war on drugs and killings. And that is President Duterte, We can even include Senator Bato de la Rosa, who
was
first
PNP
served
chief.
as the chief of police of the Philippine National Police.
Right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have this morning. Thank you for your time, NUPL-NCR Secretary General and ICC Assistant to Counsel, Kristina Conti. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Maya Rodriguez. You're watching CNN Philippines.